Great. Okay, good. So I think we can get started. It's almost noon. I am going to chair the meeting today because Councilmember Buscaino is unavailable. And so we will get going on this. There's a lot of things on the agenda. So let's go to item 1. I'll call the meeting to order. And we have item 1 is, do we need to do roll call? We have Dwight Robinson, we have Supervisor Hahn remotely, we have Supervisor
Bartlett.
Remote, and so that's a full quorum for the committee. And we have a report in agenda item number 1 from Baskin Yardemian. Did I say that right?
Sure, and I'm sure he won't mind because he's in Montreal. I'm actually Ashnik Ravan presenting on his behalf. I'm Baskin version 2.0.
Okay, good. Please go ahead and explain item 1 to us.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ashnik Ravan, and I'll be covering item number 1, which is to approve additional funds for onboard CNG fuel tank replacements on school buses and authorize execution of grant agreements. So by way of background, in 2012, the board approved a program announcement where $3 million was approved for onboard CNG fuel tank replacements on public school buses. Applications were accepted on a first-come, first-served basis for tanks that were between 14 and 16 years old, with a maximum funding of up to $20,000 per school bus. Since the initial program announcement in 2012, we have awarded an additional $5 million, totaling $8 million to date, of which 97% of those funds have already been awarded and expended, totaling 389 school buses that have benefited from these funds. So this proposal is to allocate an additional $3 million, which would equate to approximately 150 buses, to maintain the continuity of this program for the replacement of additional onboard CNG tanks. And the recommendation is to approve $3 million from the Carl Moyer Program AB 923 fund to continue onboard CNG fuel tank replacements for public school buses and to execute grant agreements on a first-come, first-served basis until funds are exhausted under the existing open program announcement. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to approve this amount.
Public comment.
Second.
Yes.
We have one public comment, it seems.
All right. Okay. So we will go to any questions.
I'm sorry. This is on agenda.
Members?
This is on agenda item number 5.
Okay. So we won't worry about that right now. Any other questions from my committee members? We have a motion and a second, so I'll ask for a roll call.
Supervisor Bartlett?
Yes.
Supervisor Hahn?
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson?
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion
Okay,
passes.
let's move on. The motion passes. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 2. This is establishing a special revenue fund, recognizing revenue and transfer of funds, and execute agreements to develop and demonstrate a special technology called water in fuel retrofit technology for ocean-going vessels. And this is rather unique. So we have, I guess, a report from Mei Wang. Is that correct?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
So the background of this item is we're expecting ocean-going vessel to be one of the largest NOx emission source in 2023. So we need a significant reduction from these vessels. However, there are many challenges that based on the current International Maritime Organization regulations, only the 2016 or newer vessels are required to have a Tier 3 engines. And Tier 3 is a 75% cleaner than Tier 2, and they are the cleanest available engine right now for these vessels. However, we don't see that many Tier 3 engine vessels to visit our ports, and we're not expecting a lot of Tier 3 engine to visit our port during the next 10 years. So in fact, that there was a significant increase in number of vessels built in 2015 with Tier 2 engines. So since the vessel was so expensive to build, they are built to last. So these 2015 vessels could be still in operation past 2040. So developing technologies that reduce emission from these vessels will be necessary. So we have a proposal from MAN. MAN is Energy Solution. They are one of the largest marine engine developer in the world. They have proposed this water in fuel retrofit technologies, which is mixing water and fuel in the immersion tank. And by introduce the water into the combustion process, reduce the peak combustion temperatures and reduce NOx emissions. So we also have commitment from MSC to provide this vessel with a Tier 2 engines that was built in 2015 and with MAN's engines. And this is a large vessel. It's about little less than 1,000 feet long and has capacity of 9,400 containers. So we are anticipate to achieve 40% NOx reductions, and we will also work with MAN to get ARB certification on this retrofit system. This project is going to cost $3.2 million. We will have a $200,000 in-kind contribution from MAN, and each of our Port of LA and Long Beach is committed to provide $500,000 for this project. We are requesting your approval for a $2 million cost share. So the recommended actions are to create a special revenue fund for this demonstration and any future clean shipping demonstration projects, and to recognize $1 million from the ports and transfer $2 million from our Rule 1111 to this newly created account, and also to execute an MOU with the ports and a contract with MAN for these demonstration projects. With that, conclude my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mei Wang?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor.
Yeah, so this is new to me. I've never heard of this idea of mixing water and fuel. I guess, according to your presentation, this company will provide the vessels for the pilot program, because obviously you're going to have to get an agreement with a shipping line who would be willing to do this, because I'm sure there's a lot of skepticism on behalf of the shipping companies, like, we're not going to mix water with our fuel. What will that do?
Yes.
So how many vessels are going to be included in this demonstration project?
So they have, MSC is a shipping line. They are a Mediterranean shipping line.
Oh, they're the shipping line.
Yes, and
So they're the shipping line, and they're going to provide the vessels. And how often do they call at our ports of Long Beach, Los Angeles?
So far we have about 5 calls during the past few years. This
That's for cheers.
5 calls during the past few years?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry,
That's not very many.
MSC is the second largest shipper in the world, so they have
Okay.
tons of vessels that come to our ports. I don't know off the top of my head how many, I don't know how many MSC vessels actually visit the Port of Long Beach in LA, but we can get that data.
I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, they're mainly on the Long Beach side, and they're the second largest. So Maersk is the largest. The two, Maersk and Mediterranean, have about 40% worldwide market.
Okay. So they call, right? So they call rig. So how many vessels are they providing for the demonstration?
They are providing 1 vessel for the demonstration, but the reason we picked this S90 engines. They are pretty popular engine for the larger vessels.
And we understand that the S90, that particular engine, has visited our ports, 700 times?
700 times.
In the last 3 years. So it's a frequent caller.
Oh, I thought I heard 5 times in the last 2 years.
For these particular vessels, they are S90 vessels. this is the engine model is S90, and there are a lot of vessels have S90 engines, and MSC has provided this vessel Sylvia that is gonna be for this demonstration project.
So how many calls does this particular vessel do we think will make in Long Beach?
So, yeah,
Just a minute.
The intent is
I
not,
wanted to say that Supervisor, it's a demonstration project.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out how much
It involves only one ship.
that's what I heard. So I'm
Right.
asking for $3 million, how much is that, how many times does that one ship call
At our port.
at our ports?
Okay, yeah, go ahead,
That's what
Steph.
I'm trying to get to.
we think it's a limited number, probably less than a handful, but the intent is to verify the technology so that it becomes, you can get emission reductions that's verified through ARB, and then they would potentially put it on the remainder of their vessels or other S90 type vessels. So the intent is to show that it can be done. You can get 40% NOx reduction is what we're hoping. And then once it becomes verified by ARB, then they can put it on the rest of the vessels. So then it could be magnified by the number of calls that the S90 vessels or S90 engines visit our ports. So although it's an investment, it's not just for that one vessel, it's for that class of vessels.
Right, you're just trying to get a demonstration. So you don't really care where it calls, actually, right?
Well,
You
we
just
care-
want
No,
it-
we do.
We do want to make sure that it's here, because it's easier for us to track and verify the emission reductions.
Right. I don't
I think
know.
it-
To be
I-
honest with you, you can hear my skepticism, right? 3.2 million for one vessel, and we think it's not even calling all that much in
But
our
let's
ports.
ask another question.
Okay,
This one boat is going to be 3.2 million,
right.
but when we apply it to, say, the other engines, these S90 engines, do we expect that cost to remain at 3.2 million, or is it going to be an affordable cost to move to this new technology?
yeah,
I think that's what we want to know.
once it's commercially available, it will be between $500,000 and $750,000 for this device.
And when will
For
that
a
be?
boat.
When will that be?
So the demonstration will be until 2021 will wrap out. Is verified, depending on the demonstration and verification. So probably in 3 years, we will be able to offer this as a commercially available product.
So did I hear you correctly? The cost is anywhere from 100 to 150,000 per ship?
No, 500 to 750.
Say it again?
500,000.
500,000 per ship.
And that
Okay.
is, yeah, and that's, of course, is a pre-commercial estimate. So by the time it gets to a product, it could be less, it could be more, but the intent of this demonstration is show the efficacy of the technology, and whether they can achieve the NOx reductions that they're targeting, and how do they harden it into an actual product. So that's all part of this project, is to really.
And then moving forward, it's still voluntary, right?
It would be voluntary, yes.
And it would also coordinate with the existing program at the ports, which is in that special zone that, what is it?
Yeah, the 40 miles.
Miles offshore.
Yeah, the low sulfur.
That they reduce their speed
Yeah,
and also reduce NOx emissions. So
right.
would it result in more NOx emissions than what we're already getting from reduced vessel speed?
Yes, significantly.
Significantly more, okay. All right, any more questions on this?
Yes,
Seeing
Chairman
none?
Mitchell, I have a
Right, do you have one?
yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
So I just want to understand, first of all, a little bit of how are we going to be collecting the data on this? So what's that process being, this is moving internationally across the Pacific and,
So there will be a data loggers.
okay,
So they will collect data for the free tests, and then once they commission on this, they will have the sensors installed so they can collect the data. And the testing, they are proposing a testing hours. So basically, we'll be right now the proposal is under 140 nautical miles. So they will be collecting data from the vessel approaching our ports.
so when it's within 140 nautical miles?
That's the
Okay.
proposed, yeah.
All right, and then does the date, I assume the data is taking into account the reduction in speeds and things like that.
Yes.
And so,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
okay, just to make sure that I understood that. Secondly, I was just wondering, are our counterparts in Asia working on similar concepts like this? I know that staff's been over to China at least a couple of times talking with them. So I'm just wondering, I mean, are we the first guinea pig here? Are they working, you know, in conjunction on similar things on their side?
So we've, or MAN has experience in doing this water and fuel technology before. So they have a fairly high degree of confidence. I think our visitations or our planning and rules group has been to talk about more on the incentive program that they want to set up, which is follow on to successful demonstrations such as what's under this particular project.
Yeah, we don't, I just verified with planning staff, there are no other motivators for folks in Asia or elsewhere to do a lower emission reduction technology. So we're kind of at the forefront pushing this, and the reason is because we need it for our AQMD. But other parts of the world, they don't really see this as a need. They're really looking more at GHG, local regulations, or the ECA.
Okay. And the tough part in all of that is that, as was mentioned, you know, these ships are calling fairly infrequently. Even if it's in a rotation coming here, it's going to be, you know, once every 8 weeks. So,
Yep.
you know, maybe 6-7 times a year at most.
Right.
So it's without developing that partnership with some other countries, it's going to be challenging and probably have to be incentive funded
Exactly.
on
So
Southern
right.
California. So.
Just as we do for on-road, we need the technology developed. We also need policies and incentives, and so that it's kind of 3 legs of that story. So this is the technology piece.
Okay, and the policy part is probably IMO? Just
IMO,
because-
it's also ARB with some of their regulations, and then the incentive piece is the primer concept that we've developed.
Okay, all right. Lastly, I just want to say how much I appreciate the hard work that staff's put into this. As Supervisor Hahn was mentioning, it's really difficult to find a steamship line that would be willing to consider this, and I know you all have been, I heard about the relationship with MSC, you know, 2-3 months ago, and you know, I know that it's been a focus for you all because vessel emissions are a pretty critical point over the next decade that we'll have to focus on, and they're probably one of the most challenging because of the international aspect, not just you know, constitutional preemption issues and things like that. So I just want to say I appreciate all the time you put into it. Thank you very much.
Mayor Mitchell, can I say something? Yeah, I mean, obviously I appreciate it too. I'm just a little skeptical at the amount of money and the less than a handful of calls. And is this going to be enough data that will give us the information we need to expand it? But nevertheless, looks like we're doing it. Will this, is this an additive, this water to fuel, that it's a whole different, I'm sorry if I missed that, a whole different tank that they switch over to when they come within the 40 miles? And does that exist while they're at berth when they're burning, you know, keeping the lights on? Are they still going to be on that water to fuel tank?
So the demonstration project is intended to be at a low speed, so we'll be within our water. Right now, the testing extended range to 140 nautical miles. The vessel will adopt the speed reduction at within 40 nautical miles. So
Right.
more likely the water and fuel will be used within the 40 nautical miles, and
Right.
it's a.
But is it a different tank? Is it a tank that they switch over to, or they just start adding water?
Yeah, there's a emulsion tank that mix the water and fuel together and then inject into the combustion chamber, and
I
then
see.
bypass that during the voyage. They won't be using the water and fuel the whole time, the duration of a voyage, just
Right.
when they are crossing to our ports.
Right. Well, okay. And again, I'm just going to go on record, Judy, as I always do. These are all interesting experiments, but I still think where we can get the most bang from our buck is at berth emissions. And I really want to see our investment go towards the 98% reduction of some of those emissions at berth, because I still think that's a problem, and I'd rather see our money go there. But that's my personal opinion.
Great, thank you for that. And this, of course, this program doesn't preclude at birth. Emissions.
I know. I just,
different.
this seems kind of pie in the sky.
And I will say that while $3.2 million is a lot of money in my book, compared to some of the projects that we fund here, it's not a lot of money. I mean, we put $40 billion into the Volvo Lights project last year.
Not billion.
And I mean, 40 billion, it wasn't all our money, but 40 billion went into that project. And that's certainly a worthwhile project. I mean, we need to get heavy duty trucks.
The project
Matt, do you want to correct me?
It wasn't a billion. If we had 40 billion, we'd meet our AQMD goals. It was 40
That's
million.
right. That would be enough for 1 billion a year for our
That's right.
QMD. That's wishful thinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
40 million.
That's right.
Okay, well, and this gets 40% NOx reductions if it's promising to deliver some substantial NOx reductions. Go ahead, Dwight.
We just have a public comment when you're ready from Ranji George.
Okay, I will hear the public comment now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, board members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on this subject. I think the intent is very good. I'm glad they're exploring options to reduce NOx, but I think the scale is staggering. The amount, as I understand, I could be wrong, the clean fuel funding is about 10 million. 3 million is a lot of money. And when I was working at AQMD, I was 20 years in the TAO, that thing. There was an informal understanding between staff members and board members. We shouldn't invest more than 500,000 in any project because there are so many competing needs for it, and which can give us a lot more value for the money we spent if we spread it apart. And we managed to bring a lot of technology online. I'm glad to see that many are being commercialized today, but I would encourage you to spend this money, let's say about 300 or 400 with national labs. They have great deal of expertise who can do fuel injection, the type of technology they are working on. Just give them the money, let's prove the concept in the lab and maybe go in phases rather than jump and throw all this money and they then simply can walk away. We have seen a lot of partners walk away from the technology because they had very little skin in the game. They will promise it, they'll promise some, they'll in-kind contribute. So I urge you very strongly that put that money instead into fuel cell projects, hydrogen stations at these ports. They need it, and you'll get a lot more NOx emissions reductions. But the scale, and not the intent, but the scale of the funding is staggering. That's from the experience we've had. And of course, people like us, we are tough negotiators with the people who come to us, and we made all of them happy, and we had a very successful program. I would urge the staff not to spend such kind of money on any particular project. That's my little thing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments from?
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Supervisor Bartlett. Go ahead,
Thank
please.
you. So I just want to piggyback onto the comments of Supervisor Hahn. I know we're trying to achieve a 40% NOx reduction, but there's got to be that balance between the combustion stability and the loss of power. And so my concern is that we're putting in $2 million, total of $3.2 million into this little pilot project, and trying to achieve that balance of adequate power and emissions reductions. I guess one of my concerns is that the adequate power is a key feature of this. And with the emissions reductions, we may not get to that 40%, and we could spend a significant amount of money. And in order to maintain the adequate power which is required, the emissions reductions might be a much lower percentage. So I just wanted to throw that out there as one of my concerns here. Thank you.
Would staff like to respond to that?
So this technology is going to be used for the low speed. So the difference when you say loss of power means a higher fuel consumptions, and the fuel consumption increase will be going only be about 1% during the low testing. So it's kind of irrelevant for the loss of power.
But Supervisor, you're absolutely right. Okay. That is one of the typical concerns whenever you inject something, energy absorber like water, into a combustion process. So I'm very pleased to hear that you caught on to that. And that was one of the issues that we had with emulsified fuels on-road technologies about a decade ago. So that was one of the first questions that staff asked MAN is what are you going to do about this potential for loss of power, loss of efficiency? And then as May said, they've already looked at this in some of the European demonstrations and they said they've seen about a 1% decrease, but since it is in this low load mode and low speed mode, they don't anticipate it'll have a drastic effect. But that's
Okay,
one of
great.
the things,
Thank you for that information.
and that's one of the things that we'll be monitoring as part of this project.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments from committee members?
Just one last
Okay.
one from me, Judy. Just,
Yes, go ahead.
you know, the key point for me is that, you know, if we don't look at some retrofit technology, you know, these ships are going to stay in service for at least a couple of decades, if not longer. The only thing that would push them out any faster is if the ships grew dramatically in size beyond where they are today, and they had to get replaced because of economic factors. But I mean, they're built to last for quite some time. So investing in retrofit technology probably makes the most sense, because anything else, it's going to be not cost effective for anyone to ever make any changes for the next couple of decades, and it would be cost prohibitive by just about anyone in the world to try to incentivize ship replacements. So let alone just us here in the South Coast. So that's why I'm supportive of it.
Good, okay. I'm supportive of it because I always am very supportive of new technologies. And Dwight makes a good point that, you know, you won't get ship replacements. I mean, if they're not, once they're built, they're in service for a very long time. And our board has done a pretty good job about incentivizing vessels to come in at lower speeds and get reduced NOx emissions and SOx emissions from that program. So I think a program could be developed where this kind of technology would fit in to that. The incentives they offer, I think, are there is something offered for their reduced speed. I know Long Beach, Port of Long Beach. I've heard what they do over there, and so I think it would be a program that's worth pursuing. So I'll look for a motion on this item. See where we go.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Okay. Second. All right, I will second the motion. And we can call.
I'll second it if you want me to.
Seconded.
I'll
Okay,
second it.
Supervisor, thank you. And then I'll ask for a roll call vote on it, please.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Supervisor Hahn,
Hesitantly, yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell.
Aye.
Motion.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Motion passes. I think that was going to be the next proclamation. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 3, which is to execute agreements to establish endowments to support Graduate Student Scholarship Fund. And we have a report here from Sung Bum Ha. So did I say the name right? But go ahead, please.
Okay. This item to execute agreement for endowment to support Graduate Student Scholarship Fund. In April 2019, the board approved the release of the RFP for endowment to announce the availability fund and solicit proposals for this endowment opportunity. And this fund is to support university graduate student scholarship for researches related to air quality and climate changes. And this funding, the amount of the funding was targeted up to $1 million from the PPR for Settlement Project Fund. The proposals were evaluated using a criteria as outlined in the RFP, and it's shown in the table. The priority of the evaluation was placed on the research capability and experience that aided in South Coast Air Quality's AQMD's air quality goals. And 10 additional points could also be awarded to proposers with that had scholarship programs would integrate into existing programs with a successful track record and national level laboratories. The evaluation panel consists of 3 AQMD staff, 1 air quality specialist, 1 senior public affairs manager, and 1 atmospheric measurement manager. And those panels were selected based upon their knowledge and expertise. The AQMD has received 2 proposals from National Fuel Cell Research Center at UCI and the California State University at Los Angeles. Both proposals were qualified to be evaluated as they met program objective, as well as they have a program for research and education in air quality, climate change, and sustainability. UCI has a long history of air quality research by establishing the National Fuel Cell Research Center, as well as Advanced Power and Energy Program. And they have been working on a lot of the related researches, and especially NFCRC has a national level laboratories with the significant capability and facilities for these related research, and they have been doing for more than 2 decades in this area. And UCI is currently working on multiple microgrid projects with South Coast AQMD, and it is expected that the result of these programs will have significantly help the renewable hydrogen and natural gas production technology, as well as those facilities in the near future. California State University, LA, they have extensive experience for research project with national labs. So through these programs, the students receive opportunity for research and training at JPL, NASA, and other national laboratories. In addition to that, CSULA provides opportunity for their students to work with local industries by partnering with LA Clinton Incubator, Proterra, BYD, and other companies. Both the universities have an educational program on criteria pollutant emissions and air quality, as well as the health impact of air pollution, and they are developing further curriculum to focus more on these topics. The proposed one-time endowment would establish a graduate student scholarship to be supported annually, and the awarded student will lead and promote important research for air quality and emission reductions. And the scholarship fund will be overseen by advisory board consisting of representatives from South Coast AQMD and potentially other co-funding organizations. The staff recommend to execute agreement to establish a one-time endowment to support graduate student scholarship, $1 million to NFCRC at UCI, and $250,000 to California State University at LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on this? I have one question. Does Cal State LA have a robust graduate school program?
Yeah, so I'm not sure you're aware, but they have one of the few hydrogen stations in kind of the East LA region. And so they do have a graduate program that centers around the station upkeep. They do some fuel cell activities on vehicles. So they do have a fairly large program. They compete in the DOE advanced car competition that's held every 2 to 3 years. So yes, they have it's more of a master's level program as opposed to a PhD level program. That's why we're suggesting a different differentiation between UC Irvine versus Cal State LA.
And it's a one-time endowment. I'm wondering what that means then. Does the money get filtered down from the principal, or do you rely on the income from the say the $1 million endowment to fund continuing scholarships?
It's more of the latter. So as we learned when we provided endowment to UC Riverside, they're using the interest for that to establish programs. So we're hopeful that both universities will be able to do something similar where they would establish that in a fund as they're developing programs, or as they let it sit in the fund, and they can use the accrued interest to have an ongoing program. We understand that the Cal State grant is rather small in comparison, so we just need to, we want them to have something that's ongoing. So the purpose of a one-time is so we're not continually having to fund the program.
But we can control that, right, with the endowment. We
Yes.
can put restrictions on it.
And that's the intent of having.
We don't have to say we hope they do it. We can dictate that they do it.
Right. And that's the reason for having an advisory board where we would be part of that.
I see. Any questions from committee members on this item? Okay, I will look for a motion. Requires a motion.
I'm the only one in Diamond Bar here, so I'll move the recommended action.
With such reluctance this morning.
Well, you all are in
And I'll
remote
second.
locations, I know.
No one wants to spend any money today. Okay, we have a motion from Dwight, and I'll look for a second from somebody.
Second.
Thank you, Supervisor Bartlett. Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Supervisor Hahn,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Mayor,
Yes. Thank you. Item 4. This item is to recognize revenue transfer funds, amend contracts for the Enhanced Fleet Modernization Program, EFMP, and reimburse the general fund for the administrative costs. I will announce first that while I do not have a financial interest or conflict for this matter, I am a member of the California Air Resources Board, and that agency is involved in this issue. So we will turn to the program supervisor, Tom Lee, for a report on the EFMP.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Tom Lee. I'll be speaking about the funding and contracts for the EFMP program. As you may know, this program has been branded as Replace Your Right in Our Basin. It was launched about 4 years ago, and since then, about $40 million have been paid out for about 5,100 vouchers. Most of these vouchers were for the cleanest technology. That would be plug-in hybrids, battery electric, fuel cells. And the other, roughly 1/3, were just higher MPG gasoline cars and non-plug-in hybrids. We had some growing pains in the beginning, but in the past 2 years, we've improved the online system and also did more outreach. And for the last year alone, we...
Does each voucher count for?
It depends. We processed over 1,700 vouchers in 1 year. We also reached a couple of pretty important goals here. The first was to help the disadvantaged communities. And we have 93% of participants residing in those areas. And also, number 2, we try to get dirtier cars off the road. The average miles on the retired vehicle was about 180K. So our proposals are to recognize the revenue for the new grant from CARB for the new fiscal year, authorize the executive officer to accept the grant terms and conditions, transfer funding from a local fund, which is the AB 923, as a buffer. And this is to avoid any interruption of the program, just in case of any, if the funding runs low. The way this program runs, we depend on 3 board-approved contractors for case management support, and 2 of the contracts are running out of funds. So this next item, the 4th bullet, is to add funds to these 2 contracts. And finally, to reimburse the general fund for administrative costs necessary to run this program. Recommended actions are recognize up to $12 million from CARB into Fund 56. Authorize the executive officer to accept the terms and conditions of this grant agreement. transfer up to $3 million from AB 923 to Fund 56 as a temporary loan. Authorize the executive officer to amend the case management contracts to add funding to these two contracts. And finally, reimburse the general fund up to $1.2 million from Fund 56 for admin costs to run this program. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there questions about this program?
Yes.
We've been doing this for several years, and it's been very successful, I will say. Have, a lot of applicants. We're always oversubscribed, right? I mean,
That is absolutely
we don't have money left over.
Yes. Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Bartlett.
Just a couple of questions. So I know that 2 out of the 3 contractors are in need of additional funds. Are these funds in the vouchers that they supply to the people purchasing the new vehicles, or are these funds to provide for the case management services that they provide? I guess I'm confused as to what the admin cost of this program is.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. That would be for the case management staff time.
Staff time, okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then with the vouchers that are provided, I know that a number of the clean air vehicles are being purchased, but is there any follow-up once the vouchers are given out to individuals as to the type of vehicles so that we can keep track of the types of vehicles that are being purchased and that they are better than what they currently are turning in?
Oh, absolutely. The type of vehicles is what determines the incentive amount. So we keep a database on all the vehicles that are the replacements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Any public comment on this program?
Not on this one. We have one on the next item, though.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion on item 4 if anyone wants.
Move the item.
Thank you, Supervisor. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dwight. And roll call.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Supervisor Hahn,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. And that brings us to item 5, which is the Clean Fuels Program Draft 2019 Plan Update. And this is an item for discussion. Joe, go ahead. Joe Impeliti is here to give a report on this program. We have quite a long update for the draft 2019 plan. So go ahead, Joe.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to present today is what our draft 2020 plan update is and what the overview of that includes. What that includes is identifying the technical areas that we're going to focus on over the next year, describe the projects, some of the projects in each of those planned areas, and also some of the proposed costs of those projects. Also, we're going to let you know what our inputs that we solicited are and how we came about these determinations for the program. First, the input process. Every year we have 2 advisory group meetings. We have one in January and one in September. Typically, the one in January is backward looking. We look at what we accomplished over the previous year. And then the September meeting, we look forward to what we're going to do the following year. Our group meetings consist of 2 groups, our Technology Advancement Advisory Group, as well as the Clean Fuels Advisory Group. In addition to that, we invite our technical experts, some of the consultants that we work with. Also, we look at conferences, annual merit reviews, meetings that happen throughout the year, such as the ACT Expo conference and some of the merit reviews that we attend and participate in, the DOE Vehicle Technology merit reviews, as well as the DOE Hydrogen and Fuel Cell merit review. Other things that we take into consideration are things that are occurring on the state and federal levels. For instance, the White House decision on revoking California's waiver to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. Also, we take note of the federal funding for DERA and airshed grants. This is a big opportunity for us to go after those funds. The EPA Cleaner Truck Initiative. EPA announced that Cleaner Truck Initiative, a future rulemaking to update standards for NOx emissions from heavy-duty trucks and engines. The action follows petitions for rulemaking in this issue from 20 different organizations across the country, including the South Coast AQMD. Also in the CEC, the Low Carbon Fuel Production Program. That program will facilitate greenhouse gas reductions and reduce criteria and toxic emissions by funding in-state production of alternate and renewable fuels. Also, another thing that's going on is the heavy-duty on-road omnibus low NOx regulation. The CARB board approved the 2016 state strategy for the state implementation plan. And one of the key measures of the SIP is the establishment of the on-road heavy-duty low NOx engine emission requirement that would provide a 90% reduction in NOx emissions compared to today's engines. Also, the truck and bus regulation by 2023, nearly all trucks and buses will be required to have a 2010 or newer model year engine to reduce PM and NOx emissions. Starting in 2020, the vehicle will have to be compliant with this regulation because the DMV will not register any vehicles earlier than 2010. And finally, the CARB Advanced Clean Truck proposal, which will regulate zero-emission truck sales based on the manufacturers of those trucks, on their sales volumes in the state. This will begin in 2024 and follow through to 2030, and be the percentage of the. Yeah. So these are the Clean Fuels Program draft plan update. These are some of the key projects that we're looking at, including in that plan. These are what we're considering for 2020. And not all of these projects will be actually completed. It's based on our funding ability to do those projects. These are, the draft plan update also includes 9 key technical areas that the highest priorities are for us, and these are the areas where we believe the funding will have the greatest impact. This is a look at what the plan distribution is in terms of funds. And as you can see from the chart, the majority of the plan distribution, about 45%, is zero-emission technologies that include hydrogen and fuel cell, as well as electric and hybrid technologies. This is a comparison from of our 2020 proposed plan to the 2019 plan. There are some minor changes in some of the areas. One of the big increases is in stationary clean fuel technology over 2019, and this is going to increase is focused on the increase of electrical loads on the grid expected with the deployment of battery electric trucks. So we're looking at microgrids and on-site generation to reduce those impacts. This is the changes in percentages from last year. The minor reductions in H2 fuel cells and electric and hybrid technologies and infrastructures due to the substantial expenditures that we made over the last 2 years Some of our largest projects, the Volvo Lights project and the Daimler electric truck project. In that, we, from the Clean Fuels Fund, we contributed around 13 million to both of those projects. So we do have some slight reductions in those areas. But most of the other areas are the same, except for, as I mentioned, the stationary technology has an increase there. So we're asking our board for guidance and incorporating the final plan update with our annual report, which we'll present to the board in March of 2020. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. And are there questions on this proposed plan? It sets forth the priorities for the agency in the next year as to where we put concentrate our efforts and our money. So any questions? We look at this every year, I would just mention, and adjust the priorities as needed. I don't see any questions. And this was a discussion item. We must have a discussion here, or everybody approves of this, I guess.
So,
okay, I don't see.
I have we have one public comment, just to remind you. Just have a question about hydrogen infrastructure to start with. So where are we at with respect to stations and growth? I know that we're seeing some additional vehicles out there. Whenever I am near a fueling station, I usually see a line. I also know that, which can sometimes mean the third or fourth car is in line for up to 30 minutes. So at some point that'll discourage purchases. I also was curious about the transporting of the hydrogen. It seems like there's just almost always one of those box trucks, on a station location, trying to fuel it up. So just kind of curious how that's all going right now.
So I can start and then staff can jump in if they have updates. So I think the state has funded 68, so close to 70 light duty retail hydrogen fueling stations. And the ones that are in retail service are about 60 already. So they have those in service.
How many of those are in the South Coast versus Northern Coast?
About half of those, 30 some odd are here in the South Coast. Ours is one of them. But you're bringing up well, let me just a couple more comments on the station. So the Energy Commission they are required by law up until there's 100 stations funded to provide $20 million a year for light duty stations. So they're the main funding agency, and we provide funding if there's a gap. But the biggest problem, as you're mentioning, is the production and delivery. So we've witnessed here in the South Coast, there was a fire. One of the two trailers caught on fire. And that shut down all of the deliveries to hydrogen stations that were provided by that one industrial gas supplier. And so it showed a really critical link in the supply chain that if any, this is just such a nascent industry that if there's any disruption in any part of the supply chain, it'll take the whole network down. And we're seeing that now in Northern California because there was a fire at one of the production plants. And so now the real strong interest by all of the members, and we just talked about the Fuel Cell Partnership this week, is how to have a more robust supply chain. So have more renewable production, very different points of production, and then the distribution is also an issue. So folks are looking at bigger stations, liquid hydrogen, or on-site reformation and electrolysis.
Is there much interest in market investment at all, or is this just it needs heavy subsidization to?
It does. So the answer to your question is yes. It does need heavy government subsidies, although now we're seeing major energy companies like Shell has been an early hand raiser say we're going to start developing stations. So they actually have quite a few stations that are that have been granted. I don't know if there's only one that I know of or two, Newport Beach and Torrance, where they actually have stations that are retail. So they're slowly coming along.
Okay. And I know that we have very few test heavy duty trucks out there right now, but with the the order backlog coming from Nikola and, at Toyota's consideration, are there any plants that are, fueling stations that are being developed beyond just what's been created just for the
for the
demonstration
demonstrations?
projects?
Do you wanna
Not at
talk
this
about that?
point. There are 3 that are part of the demonstration project.
Yeah.
One is with CEC funds, and we're cost sharing the development of dispensing for public trucks as well, in addition to the Toyota trucks behind the fence. And then the other 2 are part of the Port of Los Angeles Zanzibar grant, which is going
That's
to
a
establish
That's the Toyota,
Yeah.
the Toyota Kenworth truck project, yeah.
and it's going to establish a heavy-duty fueling station in Wilmington and another one in Ontario. And Shell is party to all 3 of the stations.
But until they see demand, they're likely not gonna put out big stations, so the hope is that you can, at least for maybe the near term, is co-locate, having heavy duty fill out some of the light duties that can supply this, the large amounts of hydrogen.
Well, I know on the passenger side, a big concern would be that we go down a similar road where CNG went, where, there's the public sector investment with some private funds, but then, because of the various challenges, then, it never really takes off. And I think that it's a viable fuel alternative. It might be a decade or 2 out, but, if it can't be successful, then there's going to be a lot of reliance on electric potentially, and at least in California here, and that'll be just kind of cuts the competition out of the market. So, okay.
Comments?
And is that the funding there tied in the H2 and fuel cells? I didn't see a separate infrastructure for.
It's for both the technology and the infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, because we broke out the infrastructure and
gas.
deployment for natural gas and renewables. So so just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dwight. Any other comments here? I noticed that the amount of money dedicated to hydrogen fuel cell is higher than what we're putting into the electric technologies. Do you want to comment on that, Matt?
Well, only because it's more expensive, right? So, as you know, as was pointed out, I think earlier in a project that we're entertaining for the marine vessels, if you're at early stage demonstrations, it's likely going to cost the public sector a bit more because no one else is willing to take the risk. And as you get closer to commercialization, then the costs start coming down, and you can do much more projects with a smaller amount of money. So that's likely why you see the bar is fairly high compared to the other sectors. It's also high because we believe we need to look at, as Councilman Robinson was saying, is these kind of big win, long-term technologies. And so we think fuel cells for vehicles is one of those types of technologies.
Right, okay, good. We do have a public comment. If there's no comments, other comments from my committee members, so we'll take the public comment now.
And it's Mr. George as well. Again.
Thank you. Thank you, board members. I'm Ranji George. I've worked in TA for 20 years in all these technologies and seen how it changes. Directly commenting on board member Robinson's concern. Hydrogen technologies are here. Three of the top manufacturers are building commercially viable vehicles, and I heard from where they are going to scale it up big time, hundreds of thousands. The only thing that's missing here are the stations. And unfortunately, ARB dealt a severe blow on hydrogen stations by that unfortunate Volkswagen settlement of light duty infrastructure, where 90% of, I believe, hundreds of millions, and a staggering amount of millions are going to electric battery and infrastructure. Almost close to zero, man, at the most 5% are going to hydrogen stations. We should be neutral in this, at least. So, and I would encourage this agency to be the flagship carrier for hydrogen fuel cells. We cannot abandon a technology that is
about to become the most powerful weapon we have to fight climate change. The fuel cells don't have a battery waste problem, which I will bring it up again and again till somebody makes a move, including the clean fuel. Instead of putting money into electric infrastructure, which is useful and which ARB is doing a good, quite a bit of money into it, let's put it into battery recycling technology, totally understand what's happening in this, what would happen when once the batteries come up for recycling. We can use it after electric cars in stationary sources, but at some point, there will be a huge amount of batteries that you need to stagger. Hydrogen doesn't have that problem, at least not at the scale we are talking about. So I urge this agency to be proactive on this light duty vehicles, because from that technology, we are going to get the heavy duty. Already Toyota is showing that. As far as the technology viability, let me say that I read, and I have to confirm, there are 16,000 forklifts now using hydrogen. I was stunned when I read that. And this is in a lot of the warehouses. They went from propane, then they went for battery, and then they settled on hydrogen for some of the same issues I mentioned. There's no battery waste. There's longer distance, very convenient to do that. So I urge this agency to take more proactive stand on hydrogen station, because you already have ARB putting tons of that. There's a big pendulum swing last year towards battery electric vehicles, and that's why hydrogen is critical, because almost everybody is supporting batteries at the expense of hydrogen. So I urge you to reconsider your priorities and put hydrogen on the front of your front burner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more public comment? Is that it from CC8?
Nothing here, no.
Yeah. There's no one here. Is there anyone in any of the other remote locations?
Nothing here.
Supervisor Hahn, do you have anyone there? I don't see
No.
anyone. Okay.
But we locked the door. We locked the door, so no one. No, just kidding. No one's here.
We got it. Okay, and so next, is there any other business to come before the committee?
Just real brief, Chair Mitchell. Earlier this year, I mentioned I think that it would be a really good idea to do an off-site meeting down in the port. And I know that we're very challenged with a lot of different things going on, but I'd really encourage the board to consider that for next year. I think getting a chance to maybe literally kick some tires down there is just a really good idea for all members. I know we try to get down there individually, but I think there'd be a lot of value in doing that. So I just want to reiterate that.
I think that's a good idea. We do have some new members of the board, and they may not be as familiar with the port as some of us. Certainly Supervisor Hahn knows the port inside and outside, probably better than anybody on our board.
I do, but I think that's a great idea to have a meeting at the port. I think that's a great idea.
I think, and a lot of people may not have seen the Long Beach Container Terminal, which is all electric, and that's quite an operation to see. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, and we can ask our staff to put something together. It can be, I guess we have to avoid the Brown Act unless we agendize it, but just probably be a good idea to invite all the board members or any other board members, not just our committee. So
it seems like staff may already be working on it, so I'll let
Matt. We did try, because we remember that Councilman Robinson made that request earlier this year, or was it last year? But so we tried to convene a meeting, I guess it was last month, but there weren't enough board members that were able to make it. So we'll continue to look for an opportunity to do the same thing. So we are working on it. Yeah. It's just, we need to get enough. We can't VT from the location that we were trying to get. It was down at the port, that the DoubleTree Inn, and so we needed to have a quorum of people that actually could get there. And at the time, we couldn't get a quorum. So we'll keep trying.
So we might be, maybe we can think of it in terms of not so much a meeting of the committee, but as a special tour. And so you don't need to VT it, is what I'm thinking, that you can just have a tour where we hire up a bus, and Long Beach does some wonderful tours, and so maybe we can just combine, with the port and
That would be
schedule something.
easier.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It would be easier than to try and actually have an agendized meeting.
Okay, that's great.
So,
Let us get some
Okay.
dates together.
good, okay.
Meeting tour.
And
for as many
then,
people as possible with us. Yeah.
then I'll ask if there's any public comment on an item that is not on the agenda. There's no one here. Anyone else at CC8?
I don't see anyone here.
Okay, and I think the remote locations have no one either. So thank you all for a good meeting today, and we will adjourn until our next meeting, which is, when is it? It is November 15th. We
Thank
will
you.
adjourn to November.
Thank you for chairing.
Yes.
Yes, good, well done, Mayor Mitchell.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Bye, everybody.
As much practice as we can here.